Good morning, welcome to Chatham House. My name's Catherine O'Keefe. Delighted to have you here. If you need any help, ask one of the people wearing a blue lanyard, they're the staff. The fire exits are located there and there. Please make sure you keep your bags and coats out of the corridor in case of tripping. I can see quite a few, so if you wouldn't mind moving them, thank you. And please put your phones on silent. And we don't allow any filming or recording, and this event is going to be held under the Chatham House rule, apart from the keynotes, including this one.
Good morning. A warm welcome on a cold day. Great to see so many of you have made it here. Let me introduce today's conference session. So this is the 2025 edition of Chatham House sort of competition policy conference. The theme this year is resilience, rivalry, and regulation. So a lovely alliteration there. In a fragmented global order. We'll kick off with Sarah Cardell, who's here with us today to give the first keynote speech of the day. Thank you, Sarah, for coming to Chatham House today to share with you your thoughts, your take on the UK and indeed the CMA's challenges and opportunities when it comes to, I guess, navigating the post-Brexit world in the UK. And there are many challenges and opportunities as I see it. As we've just mentioned, Sarah's speech will be live streamed and will be on the record. We have a second keynote speech after lunch. We are pleased that Diana Kelly, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the DOJ Antitrust Division, will be speaking to us. She'll be speaking to us via a video link, in part because travel arrangements couldn't really be finalized during the recent government shutdown in the US. So her speech will also be on the record. And then, as just mentioned, everything else really, other than the Q&A, which Sarah and I will do after your speech, will be subject to the Chatham House rule. And this is the House rule here, of course, and we will apply it. You will be familiar with it, but just for the record, it means you can take away all the information you hear, but you should not be attributing specific comments to individual speakers or organizations. And finally, I just want to thank really all of the distinguished panel participants who will be joining the various panels today. There really are incredibly interesting senior representatives of their organizations, businesses, government agencies, and academia. And we have people from the European Commission will be speaking, from the Australian ACCC, the South African Competition Commission, in addition to the keynote speakers. And then we'll be joined, I'm very happy to report, by Enrico Letta, by video link as well later, so familiar to you all as a former Italian Prime Minister and, of course, the author of the Letta report on the single market. So thanks very much for joining us today for this conference. It should be a fantastic day with great panels to come. Let me briefly turn to the core theme of today's conference: resilience and growth in today's challenging and volatile geopolitical framework. To put it bluntly, and it's been said a few times, it's true, Europe has been falling behind. When I use Europe here and today, I do include the UK in that term, in terms of productivity and growth. There are two striking data points I thought might be of interest to share with you, just to kind of give you a sense, or to help me get a sense of some of the challenges ahead. Looking, for example, at the discrepancy between, I guess, the United States economy and Europe and the UK. I read an interesting article by Daniel Zuskind in October in the Financial Times, where he notes that if one removes London from the UK economy, And it's a big if, right? Because we all know the economic significance of London. But if one removes London from the UK economy, the average GDP in the UK is below the average GDP of Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the United States. And so that gives you a sense of the sort of the geographic challenge apart from anything else in the UK. Conversely, and that's a point which you may have seen in the Draghi report, if you remove the tech sector from the United States economy, another huge if, but if you do that, the GDP is pretty much equivalent to that in Europe, so the delta isn't very big. Last layer on top of this is that over the next couple of years, we will, for the first time, see a declining workforce in Europe and in the UK. And so in terms of finding growth, it is absolutely clear that will need to come from investment in productivity, and it will need to come from technological development in the UK, in Europe, and not just in the US, not just in China. I think that is absolutely the core of the challenge as I see it, but others will comment on this obviously today. To meet this challenge, among other things, I think we need two things: clear and decisive direction by governments, and then this is, I guess, the essence of today to a large extent, smart, enabling market interventions, or indeed lack of market interventions by regulators. And this means, and no one knows this better than Sarah, that as far as the CMA is concerned, there is no easy day these days at the CMA. The challenge is there every single day, and decisions need to be made every single day. So on this note, please let me welcome Sarah to the stage to share with us her vision of how the CMA can play its part in meeting these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Before I start this formal speech, I'm going to go a little bit off script, and I know that my CMA colleagues who are watching this online are now panicking, and I'm quite enjoying that. I just want to start. Actually, I mean, Philippe, you just mentioned there's no easy day. There's lots of challenging days. There's lots of rewarding days. But what I want to start by saying is, without every single person who works at the CMA, we would not be able to do the amazing things that I think we're doing, and we have done over the last year, and we will continue to do. And I get the privilege, I get the honor of being able to stand up and do these speeches. But it's every single person, the dedication, the commitment of every single person who works at the CMA who makes that happen. So I just want to take this moment to say a big thank you to everyone at the CMA who has contributed so much over the last year. I want to say a special thank you to Ruby, who has been my speechwriter extraordinaire, both in the speech last year when we first created the 4 Ps, and I hope in an equally exciting and impactful speech that I'm about to give. I want to say a big thank you to Alice, who just keeps me on the straight and narrow, gets me everywhere I need to go, keeps me fed, watered, and basically runs my entire life. A big thank you to Sam, to Olivia, and to the team who've been working on our strategy. We're publishing that very shortly. They're back in the office, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And to Anthony and Jessica, who have just kept all of our strategic thinking, all of our comms going over the last year. So with that, back to the speech. 12 months ago, I had the privilege of addressing Chatham House in a speech which marked the start of a year of change for the CMA. And it's an honour to be invited back to reflect on the progress that we have made and share some thoughts on what lies ahead. It has been a challenging year, but it's also been an energising one. And of course, the challenge brings the reward, the opportunity to have a real impact on the health of the UK economy and the prosperity of households across the country. Now, a year on, I think my assessment of the transformation that we needed at the CMA has stood the test of time. And it has been delivered with more urgency and widespread adoption across the organisation than even I might have anticipated 12 months ago. Now, as any CEO knows, there will always be external commentary on the right way forward for your organisation. But, as they say, Distractions are plentiful, work is hard, and time is short. So my focus has been on delivering tangible benefits for the UK economy, grounded in the real-world context of our current operating environment. And of course, actions speak louder than words. So before we turn to the future, it's worth reflecting on the last 12 months of delivery. Starting with one of the big commitments that I set out in my speech a year ago here today, we are fundamentally transforming how we work through our 4Ps program, which is already delivering over 75 changes across all areas of our work. That includes a step change in how we engage with stakeholders and parties to our investigations. 4 meetings of our Growth and Investment Council this year, multiple roundtables, upgraded outreach, earlier meetings with senior decision makers, and a clear relationship reset with the investment and business community. Turning to our casework. In mergers, we've introduced ambitious new KPIs to streamline and speed up the pre-notification and phase 1 process, as well as updating our approach to jurisdiction, to remedies, and to global deals. In competition enforcement, we've imposed financial penalties of around £200 million and secured more than £120 million in financial payments through commitments, putting money back directly and promptly into the NHS and the government's affordable housing programme. In markets, we have a key role to play in easing the cost of living for people through tough times, and this year has been no exception. From infant formula and vets to fuel prices, and now with an eye on dentistry, we are taking relentless action to bring down prices and improve choices. And we've taken important consumer protection action too, for example, making changes to the way Ticketmaster operates. At the same time, as the policy landscape has shifted towards a greater focus on industrial strategy, we launched our market study into civil engineering for road and rail infrastructure. And we've leveraged our microeconomics and public policy expertise to support government in critical areas like driving up investment and scaling UK businesses. Last, but certainly not least, we've implemented 2 major new regimes under the DMCCA. More on these later. This record of delivery speaks for itself. The CMA is as committed as ever to promoting competition and protecting consumers. Now, for the rest of this speech, I want to focus on what lies ahead, because today we're launching a new 3-year strategy for the CMA. Let me be clear, this is not a moment for handbrake turns. This strategy continues the journey of transformation that we have been on over the last year. But today is an important moment. It draws together the themes of the past year, and it sets out a clear trajectory for what is to come. If you take one thing away from today, let it be this. Our 2026 to 2029 strategy is founded on reality, responsibility, and results. So let me explain what that means. We know, Philippe's reflected it already, this is a time of acute economic pressure for the UK. Households are feeling the strain. Firms are managing uncertainty, volatility, and rapid change. Business confidence and public trust in institutions is fragile. Amidst all this, the UK needs to restore critical infrastructure and public services. It needs to bolster our economic security and resilience to global shocks. We need to navigate a volatile geopolitical environment. We need to build a country where opportunity and prosperity reach every corner. Any strategy worth its salt must be capable of surviving contact with those realities. But of course, this is only one side of the coin, because it's also a moment of enormous possibility. New technologies are expanding the bounds of human understanding and capability. Consumers have more information and choice at their fingertips than ever before. Businesses from around the world are ready to invest, innovate, and compete here. The entrepreneurial spirit that built this country is still here, if we can foster the conditions to unleash it. Reflecting this context, The UK government's priority is to stimulate economic growth, which is critical to raising living standards and unlocking better public services. Now, certain enablers are key to unlock the growth mission. Some of those sit outside the CMA's remit, but many are closely connected with the competition and consumer protection regimes, which form a core part of the UK's wider economic policy framework. And in the current policy landscape, this includes the growing interconnectedness between the UK's trade, industrial, and competition policies. This, then, is the reality of the context in which our strategy is squarely situated. An urgent need to stimulate growth, but also flowing from that, an opportunity to forge a fairer and more prosperous future for the UK. But I also said that our strategy is about responsibility and results, because it's very clear to me in this context that the CMA must play our part in helping to build a more resilient and dynamic economy that works for people across the UK. And that responsibility underpins our strategy for the next 3 years. So let me come on to that now. It should be no surprise that the fundamentals of our mandate to promote competition and protect consumers are unchanged. But we must fit the powers and resources that we have to the outcomes that the country needs. And that is why our purpose over the next 3 years is to promote competition and protect consumers with a clear end goal in mind: to drive economic growth and improve household prosperity. But that's not where our responsibility ends. How we discharge that mandate must also adapt to the context that I've described. So we have to be bold, be prepared to do things differently. We have to be rigorous, but not rigid. Be decisive, but not dogmatic. Combine continuity with change, and always focused on outcomes and not orthodoxy. In short, we must be purposeful and pragmatic. And looking back 3 years from now, I hope that is how our approach will be characterised. Before I unpack how we'll achieve that, I'd like to touch on our independence. This has, of course, been the subject of some debate over the last year. And for those who are still looking backwards at leadership changes in January, I will say with absolute conviction that there has been no reduction in the operational independence of the CMA since then. More broadly, I welcome a discussion around this important aspect of how the CMA operates. But let's do that anchored in reality and with a clear sense of what independence actually means for the CMA. Now, the law establishes that we take certain decisions independently of government based on an objective, evidence-based assessment. Merger decisions, for example, and more recently, our digital markets, strategic market status designation decisions. Our political independence when taking those decisions is unchanged. But that does not mean that the CMA operates in a political vacuum. We are a government department, albeit non-ministerial. We are not the independent state of the CMA. And competition policy is part of wider economic policy. So beyond those statutory questions which we decide independently of government, it's right that we're informed by the policy context in which we operate. And that economic and geopolitical context for the UK has changed dramatically in recent years. So what are the implications of this? First, our work operating the UK's competition and consumer protection regimes has a direct impact on the economy. And that carries a responsibility to act in line with wider government economic policy and priorities, provided they are consistent with our statutory duties. And with such a clear and urgent policy focus on stimulating growth to improve living standards, of course we are putting our resources behind that national endeavour. We welcomed the government's strategic steer for this reason, and you will see how we have sought to integrate it into our strategy. That might inform, for example, which markets we choose to prioritise for review, or which areas of government policy we choose to support through our research and advice. Second, our focus on that wider policy context has naturally sharpened and become more prominent in recent times as UK trade, industrial, and competition policy have become increasingly interconnected. Many of the issues that we tackle have a global dimension. It's both inevitable and appropriate that we consider this deep interconnectedness, including the more volatile global trading environment, whilst ensuring it does not cut across our statutory duties. And it is properly for government to guide that policy interplay, rather than have the CMA autonomously decide it. It's also right, in this more interconnected environment, that political influence is exercised through the proper levers in a transparent way. Again, that is why the strategic steer issued by government is so important. Now, in the context of a discussion about the CMA's independence, I'd like just to say a word about the upcoming consultation on potential changes to update and streamline the decision-making model in our mergers and markets decisions. The current model of decision-making by independent panel groups in these areas dates back many decades, and it was carried over from the Competition Commission when the CMA was formed 12 years ago. It delivers robust and objective scrutiny of relevant evidence, and it draws from a wide range of professional and industry expertise. But it is an unusual system where the CMA's chief executive, chair, and board are prevented by statute from having a role in some of the organisation's most important decisions, whilst being accountable to Parliament for them. The proposals would update that approach, bringing it into line with the new digital markets competition regime. Specifically, individual markets and phase 2 merger decisions would be taken by a board subcommittee, comprised of board non-executives, senior executives, and expert panel members. This would establish a clear line of accountability through senior executives and the board, whilst retaining the benefits of a breadth of expertise. There will still be a separate phase 1 decision maker in mergers, and as the government has set out, these proposals will not alter the independence of CMA decision making from ministers. But accountability would be enhanced, as would our ability to deliver on the 4 Ps. And this certainly reflects our positive experience with the digital markets model so far. So, turning now to the content of our strategy. We have 5 core objectives. Some of these will feel quite familiar. Others are intended to signal shifts in important areas, a combination of continuity and change. First, we will remain a strong advocate for and an independent enforcer of effective competition across the UK economy. We know this makes a difference for innovation, productivity, and security of supply, for prices, choice, and quality. But effective competition does not preclude legitimate collaboration. So, within this first objective, we will also step up our action to enable legitimate pro-growth collaboration, which can help firms to scale, to secure investment, to make innovative breakthroughs and bank productivity gains. Equally, the vast majority of mergers do not raise competition concerns, and every deal capable of being cleared unconditionally or with effective remedies should be. Our updated approach to merger remedies and how we're embedding the 4 Ps through the mergers process reflects this. And we won't stop there. In the new year, we'll launch a review of our approach to efficiencies in merger assessments. Our second objective is all about championing consumers. This is at the heart of everything that we do. But here we're talking specifically about putting money back in people's pockets, protecting them from harm, and helping businesses do the right thing by their customers, all of which contribute directly to household prosperity, as well as strengthening consumer confidence, which supports the conditions for economic growth. Now, the enhanced consumer protection regime introduced under the DMCCA marks a fundamental shift in how we uphold consumer rights in the UK. And we've taken a deliberately strategic approach to implementing it. A major focus for us in the early days has been to help businesses comply with the new rules through guidance and proactive engagement. And this will remain critical going forward. But in parallel, we've been building the evidence to launch major investigations in priority areas. You'll have seen, I'm sure, earlier this week, the output from that careful work behind the scenes as we launched a cross-economy crackdown on online sales practices, including drip pricing and pressure selling, with investigations into 8 businesses, over 100 advisory letters, and fresh business guidance. Supporting businesses to comply with the law alongside tough enforcement where it really matters to people. That is the recipe to maximise the value of the new regime for consumers and fair dealing businesses, and you can expect it to continue. So those first 2 objectives are unsurprising priorities for the CMA, and rightly so. But the third reflects an important change that we've been making over the last year, dialing up our role as an enabler of competition through advice and recommendations to government. Beyond our enforcement work, many of you will be familiar with the CMA's role advising government and public bodies on pro-competitive interventions they can make in service of broader policy goals. This is more valuable than ever in the context of the growth mission and cost of living pressures. It's essential over the next 3 years that we act as much as an enabler of competition as an enforcer of it. So, expect a gear shift here as we help government and public authorities design and deploy pro-competition interventions to support growth, innovation, and investment-related policies. This is where the unique combination of the CMA's markets, microeconomics, and public policy expertise really comes to the fore. And we believe the impact could be significant, whether by removing anti-competitive regulation standing in the way of companies scaling, or unlocking cross-economy barriers to growth like interoperability and access to data. A great example is public procurement. This costs the taxpayer £385 billion each year, yet bid rigging can inflate prices by 20% or more. Our data science and cartel enforcement teams have developed tools to scan bidding data and identify illegal activity at scale. Working closely with central government departments and other bodies, this could deliver very substantial public savings and safeguard a level playing field for fair dealing businesses. And there's a great opportunity beyond even this. Applying a pro-competition lens to public procurement can help governments shape markets to achieve critical policy objectives, from creating opportunities for high-potential firms to scale, to building supply chain resilience and boosting UK competitiveness. But time and again, we hear from stakeholders that the full potential of public procurement is not being realised, including across many of the IS8 sectors. Now, we're already providing advice about this to government departments, for example, in defence. And you should expect this third objective to be an important focus of our work in the coming years. Our fourth objective reflects how, in a world of mobile capital and talent, the UK must work hard to attract the investment needed to power growth. For the CMA, that means doubling down on our contribution to a UK regulatory landscape that instills business confidence and acts as a magnet for investment. Now, this does not mean less robust decision-making, nor that we will always see eye to eye with parties on individual cases. But achieving the outcomes in our strategy requires a foundational level of business and investor confidence in our regimes. That is what our comprehensive 4Ps framework was designed to address. And the 4Ps have driven transformative change over the organisation across the last year, and stakeholders are reporting that we're moving the dial. There's always more to do, and embedding these changes remains a central focus for our new strategy. Our fifth and final objective is an essential wrapper. Across all of our work, we will focus relentlessly on delivering tangible benefits for the UK. There are 2 elements to this. First, consciously prioritising markets and issues that deliver the greatest positive impact for the UK's economy, its citizens and businesses, setting the UK on a more stable and prosperous path. And second, leveraging the unique design of the UK's competition and consumer protection regimes to deliver outcomes that make a real difference for this country, and to foster a global reputation for a purposeful and pragmatic British approach. The digital markets competition regime exemplifies this objective. As new technology permeates every aspect of our lives, effective competition in these markets is key. Many of the competition concerns in digital markets are global in nature, but we can apply a unique UK lens to the solutions. The flexible, participative design of the UK regime means we can foster digital ecosystems here in which both the global tech giants and UK startups can innovate, invest, and grow. And the forward-looking design means we can tackle issues as they arise, keeping up with rapidly evolving technologies rather than solely addressing yesterday's problems. In combination, this means that wherever possible, we can move at pace, look for proportionate, constructive, and future-facing solutions rather than becoming mired in standoffs or litigation. Now, of course, this also depends on how others choose to engage with our process and approach. And our focus on the UK interest means prioritising issues we are best placed to tackle, those where UK businesses and UK consumers will experience the greatest tangible benefits from our work. The regime also gives us the flexibility not to prioritise some issues, for example, where they're being effectively addressed in other jurisdictions. An early example of these unique design features can be seen in our search designation. Through the course of the investigation, an emerging issue was whether the search designation should extend to Gemini. And we worked closely, both with Google and the wider ecosystem, to get the balance of that assessment right. The flexible and forward-looking nature of our regime meant we were able to conclude that it was premature to include it at this point, whilst keeping open the possibility of revisiting this question if the way that Gemini was being used for search evolved in the future. At the same time, we decided it was essential to include the use of AI overviews and AI mode. And we're prioritising action on remedies that enhance transparency, choice, and attribution for content providers in this context, issues that really matter to UK news publishers and other UK businesses. So, we have a clear purpose from which flow 5 strategic objectives. But of course, the results are what really matter. Applying these strategic objectives across all our work, we will contribute to a set of mutually reinforcing outcomes where dynamic, competitive markets drive investment, innovation, and growth. Strategically important markets for the UK and UK scaling businesses can flourish. Lower prices and fairer outcomes, particularly in essential markets, ease the burden on household budgets. Consumers can engage confidently in markets without fear of exploitation, and fair-dealing businesses can compete on a level playing field. And our expert advice and recommendations to government shape pro-competitive policies that drive growth, support consumers, and secure value for money in public services. Underpinning all of this is an upgraded operating model designed around maximising our agility and our productivity to deliver the greatest possible impact for the UK with the resources we have available. And above all, we must be accountable for the success of this strategy. So we're developing a new suite of KPIs, launching new stakeholder surveys, as well as updating our established impact assessment methodology to better reflect the full range and impact of our evolving portfolio of work. That is our 2026 to 2029 strategy. I know that you will all keep our feet to the fire in delivering it, and by staying purposeful and pragmatic, anchored in reality, responsibility, and results, I have every confidence that we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your frank and frankly clear comments. A copy of the speech will be on the CMA website, obviously, very, very shortly. Before we open up, I guess, for comments from the floor, I had one or two comments, which I would, questions and observations perhaps to put back to you. It might be interesting to return to the sort of central theme of independence, right? Because there's a lot of, that attracted, as you recognized, a lot of commentary and observation. And I think there is now a much clearer strategic steer than perhaps we had in previous years. So that is a tool which existed for some time, but is being used more, I guess, effectively by the UK government. But I think there is a sense in the marketplace, perhaps, that the government's intention is to go beyond the strategic steer and express preferences at a case level. And maybe rolling in a second question to that is the panel system, which you touched on, which will be consulted on. That may well disappear in the near future. I think you seem to be supportive of it from your comments. Is there not a risk that the political influence will extend to cases rather than political objectives? And is the abolition of the panel system perhaps not a step towards allowing the government more effective access to case decisions? That's sort of the question or concern, I guess, out there. It'd be great to hear your reaction.
Yeah, look, thank you for asking the question, because I do think it's worth spending a bit of time on this one. It's obviously been topic of some debate over the last 12 months. Look, I mean, as I said in the speech, I think that the CMA's independence in decision-making is absolutely unchanged and is really important. I can see Alex over in the audience, one of our colleagues at DVT. I think I can say really candidly, I honestly think that ministers have no desire to exert influence over the decisions that we take on individual cases, because there is a very shared, I talked a little bit in our fourth objective about the importance of our contribution to a strong regulatory landscape in the UK that supports investor confidence. Now, one of the things that supports investor confidence is a sense of certainty and a predictability and a sort of good understanding of where the kind of rules of the road are in a regulatory regime. And I think when it comes to our individual case decisions, it's very clear, the law is very clear, practice is very clear. I am not on the receiving end of calls from ministers saying, Sarah, do this, do that in individual cases. That is just simply not what is happening. And if people think it is, if lobbyists think it is, of course lobbyists want to perpetuate a particular sense of what might be happening. It is just not the case. What is the case, as I said in the speech, is that we, at a strategic level, when we're thinking about our broader policy choices, our priority choices, the way that we're operating, how we're operating, those things are absolutely rightly and centrally informed by that wider policy context. And I think, I actually think that the strategic steer we have had, it's not a new invention, but it's absolutely the right framework, the right lever to set that policy direction for us. And frankly, it's incredibly helpful for me to be able to say, look, there's a central focus priority on growth. We need to think about what we do that can help support investment. We need to think about the global context in which we're operating. We need to make sure that we're supporting consumers. Do please, everybody, take a read of our strategy document when it's out. It's a nice short read. It's only about 15 pages. And we have a page in the strategy document where we just pull out all of the themes from the strategic steer, and you can see how they track the themes that we've got in our strategy. And that's sensible, but the strategic steer emphasizes our independence. It emphasizes our focus on consumers. It absolutely guides us to think about how we can support growth. Of course it does, because that is a clear, as you said yourself, it's a clear priority for the country. But it doesn't undermine our decision-making in individual cases. And I just think this is such a misperception that needs to be clarified. So, on your question on the panel reform, again, my answer is pretty similar. There's no change to the law. There's no change to the statute. There's no change to our legal text. But it is an unusual system. I think if you look around the world, it is an unusual system where you have the chief executive, the chair, the board of the CMA prevented from having any role in those really important decisions. So what this does, it's not about diminishing our political independence. It's about enhancing our accountability for those decisions. I think it also enables us just to act on the 4 Ps. You can have, for example, in the digital markets space, you've got myself and Will Hayter as the executive director for digital markets. We are obviously kind of leading the executive function that's running that work, but we're also sitting on the decision-making committee. So of course it means that we can have an eye to pace all the time. We can have an eye to proportionality. We can hold our accountability for the 4 Ps, and we can deliver it through the process more effectively.
No, thank you very much. That's very clear, and it's good to hear your position on those points. Perhaps staying at the case level and becoming even more pragmatic, I think the phase 2 merger review process was really quite fundamentally reformed about 18 months ago, and we have now cases going through the system. And as you said, you launched the 4 Ps idea actually here last year at the Chatham House conference, and then that was developed very significantly earlier this year. And that affects everything, right? Phase 1, phase 2. My question to you is, do you have any practical observations of what you think merger parties and their advisors should focus on in order to kind of land their points, or perhaps which strategies have perhaps not been as successful as people had hoped in your view? And do you have any kind of advice for us, for the market on some of your practical insights over the last year?
A good question. I'm going to try to channel my inner Joel here, but without the accent. So, look, I think we're all kind of still going through the process of learning, particularly how we're implementing the mergers team. We're absolutely at the forefront, done a brilliant job in implementing the 4 Ps. And I think it's really delivering results, and I think we're getting good feedback. I would say we've got some top tips, but probably also a few don'ts as well as the do's maybe. So none of this is going to come as a great surprise, as you say. It's sort of pretty practical stuff, but bears repeating, I think, because it's interesting that there is a bit of variation in how different businesses and advisors are choosing to sort of engage with those changes. So the first thing I would say, unsurprisingly, is engage early and be upfront, and that should be pretty obvious, but it doesn't always happen. So that early engagement, that upfront engagement with all the issues that we are looking at, including the issues that businesses and advisors perhaps would rather brush under the carpet, right? Because when we're running through our processes, we're going to engage with all third parties who have an interest in the case that we're investigating. So we will hear that full range of issues, and it's really helpful if we hear parties' perspectives directly on that full set of issues. So I think that's the first one. The second one, again, unsurprisingly, is back up your submissions with evidence. So, of course, we're going to take more seriously and give more weight to points that have been substantiated with evidence. And again, unsurprisingly, we're likely to give more weight to the evidence where it comes through as being sort of clear, grounded business strategy rather than things that have sort of come through late in the day post an announcement of a deal. So that's fairly obvious pragmatic stuff. One thing that I've now said this a few times, and I'm at risk of alienating my legal advisory colleagues, and every time I say it, I hold on to the fact that I was once sitting in their place. Legal advisors have a very, very, very important role to play, but we really want to hear from businesses. And so please advise your clients and businesses, please have the confidence to come in and speak to us directly, because it makes a huge difference to us, particularly to our decision makers, when they hear directly from the businesses rather than having those messages translated through the lawyers. It doesn't mean the lawyers don't have an important role to play, but please, please engage directly with us. And the final point I would say is actually probably think about applying the 4 Ps. In fact, a lot of this I would say is apply the 4 Ps to yourselves as much as we're applying it. So in fact, all of it, be quick. Be quick and engage, but also be streamlined. So a lot of what we've done with our process to try to speed things up and be more focused, to say, look, let's really focus on the key issues early on. Let's sort of cut away exploring the second, third order stuff that actually we can kind of close down quite quickly. And it would really help us if businesses and advisors do the same thing, because otherwise, frankly, we get inundated with a lot of stuff that can be a bit of a distraction and a bit of a delay. So that is what I would say. I mean, I think in terms of the don'ts, we've had some quite, it's sort of interesting, just anecdotally interesting examples. So, we've heard from some businesses where they've been advised by their lawyers, don't go in early, don't go for an early teach-in because it might signal that this is an issue, that this is a case that the CMA should be worried about. Like, that's just wrong. We don't come with a sort of predetermined view that if you put your hand up and say, we'll come and give you a teach-in, that means that we think there's an issue. We just want to understand the deal. So don't shy away, and same with remedies. Don't shy away from an early conversation on remedies because you think it will mean that we're just assuming that there's a problem. So I think, those are just some of the tips I would give.
Great, no, very helpful, very specific, thank you. Last question from me before we open for questions from the floor briefly. In terms of your 3-year strategy and some of the ambitions you've outlined, how, maybe you could comment briefly on how you intend to track what good looks like, what success looks like, and perhaps with a bit of a focus on the concepts which are a little bit more difficult to capture, like transparency and proportionality, which arguably are amongst the most important concepts for business confidence. That would be great to hear you on that.
Yeah, no, we've been unsurprisingly giving that a lot of thought too. I just mentioned at the end of the speech the importance of accountability and results. At the end of the day, we have to be held to account for what we deliver, and as part of the government's broader action on regulators, there's also an increased, and rightly so, an increased focus on actually what are regulators delivering. So we're doing a number of things, as I mentioned in the speech. We're sort of upgrading our approach on impact assessment. That's particularly important because, as I sort of implied in the speech, we're broadening out the kind of work that we're doing. And so if we're thinking about influencing business conduct through guidance or through informal engagement or advisory letters, it's really important that we capture the impact of that work as well as our enforcement work. The same with our sort of wider advocacy and sort of enabling policy support. So we're widening out that impact assessment. We're also putting in place like core KPIs on the more measurable stuff like speed and efficiency. But when it comes to that sort of slightly less quantifiable side, I think that's really where our stakeholder feedback is so important. Actually at the end of the day, this community, the business community, the consumer community, we're also setting up, we've got the Growth and Investment Council I mentioned, but we're also setting up a consumer forum to make sure that we're getting that consumer voice right at the heart of our work as well. But we've got a new set of stakeholder surveys which will be going out, and that I think will be really key to get that feedback too.
Great. No, thank you very much. I know we're sort of running out of time, but of course we do want to make sure we take questions from the floor. Nelson, should we start with you? And then we've got another one here in the first row.
Thank you. First of all, Sarah, thanks so much. It was really refreshing. As a former colleague, dare I say, it's refreshing to hear you praise effectively every single member of staff at the CMA, because I think we all know that the CMA plays a hugely important role in all of this. And I think we all know, engaging with the CMA, that people are doing really great work and really important work, right? And so listening to you today, it sounded like, to the 4 Ps, we're now adding the 3 Rs. Maybe that's what we're going for. But of those 3 Rs, reality struck me as a very important one. You said we're not operating in a political vacuum. How could you? And I think everyone understands that. But many in this room are at Chatham House, really important player in terms of international policy debates. Many in this room travel a lot. And when we travel and we go to places like the US or China, the reality that one sees, or certainly the perception, is that we're falling behind. I mean, the UK and the EU, right? So instead of innovating, we're regulating. Instead of inventing, we're intervening. And so my personal concern is, when I look at debates that we have here and on the continent, is that we've even become sort of incapable of implementing any meaningful social welfare reforms these days, or lowering costs of doing business. And so in that context, I was struck by the point you made around the pro-growth collaborations. And maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on that, because when I think about areas that grow very significantly, and Philip was apparent, I think, from your introductory remark, it's tech. Tech is very key and sort of pervades all aspects of the economy. And maybe one good example of a pro-growth collaboration, to my mind anyways, are some of the AI partnerships, for instance, that the CMA looked at. And sort of, is that one of the areas that we have in mind when we talk about being enablers of pro-growth collaborations? Are there others? You know, if we could unpack that a little bit, that would be really great. Thank you.
I mean, look, you could sort of take that in a number of directions, and I know we've not got a huge amount of time, but just to give a few sort of points to respond. Look, the first thing is a sort of broader point, and we found this a little bit with the work that we did on green agreements a couple of years ago, where we had that focus. You know, actually having a conversation where we say, as the competition authority, collaboration is okay. Like, there's quite a lot of collaboration that can happen that is not anti-competitive. Even that can be an enabler. And we've been speaking about this quite a bit with our Growth and Investment Council members, and actually just going out, doing a lot of roundtables, a lot of engagement with business. Juliet and the team have been doing a lot of that kind of engagement. Looking at Vlada, who leads our stakeholder engagement team, you know, there's a massive dial up for us in that kind of activity, because simply have us say that makes a big difference. For us, particular focus is thinking about the priority sectors within the industrial strategy. So I mentioned that we are doing some work with government in defence. You know, there's some really interesting conversations there about how, if you want to encourage a sort of more diverse supply chain within the defence sector, and you have smaller players as well as the larger incumbents on the supply side, actually oftentimes they need to be able to partner and collaborate to put an offer together. And actually, how do you really open up those opportunities and support and enable that kind of collaboration? Very similar on the life sciences side. So thinking about, I think, particularly playing into areas where, from a UK industrial strategy perspective, we want to build that scale, we want to build that UK competitiveness, we want to build that resilience in supply chains, and actually where collaboration can be an important enabler there.
Thank you. One question over here. In the first row.
Good morning. My name is Mike Salem. I work for the Consumer Choice Centre, and I'm their UK representative. We advocate for freedom of choice in everyday markets. I was very grateful to hear about your comments on consumer voices. I find that very important, and that's a big part of what I try and do. I was particularly pleased to see that there was a consumer survey, for instance, when there was a decision on designating certain tech companies and asking consumers whether they switch mobile devices, though I do think they should have been focused on whether they're happy switching rather than just switching. So my question is, how can we make consultations and engagements from the CMA to consumers more accessible? Because I'm sure many people have long days at work and come back home and do not want to read a 160-page document about interoperability. I mean, I'd be happy to do it, but maybe the average Joe won't. So what can we do to break down these measures that the CMA attempts to introduce and explain to the average Joe, this is what we're planning to do, this is how it might affect you? Please, would love to hear your views.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Great question. So you're absolutely right. The consumer perspective needs to be at the heart of what we do. We often do that, as you say, through surveys on individual cases. We get a lot of feedback. I mean, part of the reason I mentioned our sort of central focus on issues which have a real cost of living focus, things like vets. I mean, we had over 55,000 responses to our initial call for inputs on vets. That was sort of off the chart. We've seen the response on issues like Ticketmaster, continuing that focus on issues that really matter to people, but also, as you say, how we communicate that, how we really make clear what we're doing, how we've got the consumers back, how we're helping people really survive day to day in really, really challenging circumstances. In terms of getting engagement, we have really good engagement with, again, through Vlada and the team, with a number of consumer representative organisations, but we are also now setting up the consumer forum, because what we've done over the last year on the growth side is we've set up the Growth and Investment Council, and that has been, really exceeded my expectations in the benefits that we've had from being able to bring in different perspectives and have that help and inform our thinking, but also share and explain what we're doing. And we really want to make sure that we can replicate that. So we have a lot of bilateral engagement with different consumer representative bodies, but we really want to create a forum where we can bring that all together. So that's what our consumer forum will do.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so I think we're going to wrap up. Briefly, just to thank Sarah, for bringing an important speech to Chatham House today and for your frank responses to our Q&A. Very insightful, great to hear your voice and to hear you on some of these topics which we're all debating. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.